Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from Star Earth Astrology, and today I'm here with my friend Annie Robinson. Oh my gosh, choking on your name. Um, Mercury entered the shadow of its retrograde. Hello. And today we're going to be talking about the Capricorn New Moon that happens on January 2nd of 2022. We're recording this on January 1st. So Happy New Year, everyone, and Happy New Year to you, Annie.
Happy New Year, Whitney.
So Annie and I met in an astrology apprenticeship back in 2018, and we kind of connected immediately through the Saturnian vibe. Annie is a Capricorn rising. I am an Aquarius rising. Yeah, and it's just I'm so happy that I found astrology because I found kind of a home for this quite large part of myself, the Saturnian piece that felt very out of place beforehand. And finding friends that share that has just been such a game changer in terms of like finding my place in the world. I don't know if you feel the same.
Definitely. I really enjoy people that understand the Saturn archetype where it's like we can be friends, but we also are withdrawn a little bit sometimes, or they don't get upset if maybe we don't return our text or messages right away. They just know we're in Saturn land and we'll get back to them shortly.
Right. Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, as I get older, I realize, I think when I was younger, I felt that isolation as kind of imposed on me from without, because I have like other very social parts of my chart. And as I get older, I realize, and especially through my Saturn return in my first house, just realizing how much I participate in my own isolation.
Yeah, definitely.
Really coming to own that. Yeah, so Annie, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, talk about your approach to astrology, kind of, yeah, your journey with astrology.
Okay.
Before we get into it.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted. I've been interested in astrology ever since I can remember. Even as a little girl, I was always reading, I started reading the funny papers, the comics, and then there was always, I think a lot of people got into astrology a little bit or had their interest piqued that way, but reading the little horoscope there. And I remember when I was away at camp, my mom would always save them for me for the week. And so exciting to read all of them when I got back, but not realizing then that that's like sun-based astrology and I should be reading for Capricorn instead of Libra, which is my sun sign. And so that kind of just even knowing my rising sign, learning that later on opened up a lot. But I've been studying formally for a little over 7 years. I've studied with a few different teachers. My current teacher I've been with for 3 years now, and I just actually signed up for the 4th year program that he offers. I started in a kind of more psychological based, like evolutionary astrology, and then have kind of morphed into studying ancient traditional Hellenistic astrology, but still combining some of those more like psychological bits and still using the outer planets for a lot of things. So it's a kind of a blend of modern and traditional astrology. Yeah, it's kind of this fun language that I know and have learned and love talking about it with other people. And yeah, it's kind of the lens that I see just day-to-day things. And yeah, I mean, through headlines or things happening, with my child, I'm a mom, I have an 8-year-old son. And yeah, just I think even the piece about knowing his chart and knowing like his learning styles, his yeah, I mean, like he was born with Mercury retrograde in Pisces, and so kind of a tough place. And so like as he's going through school, like he's having a hard time learning how to read, and I'm just like, yeah, he is. He's gonna figure it out. We all do, but like having that, it's kind of given me just the ability to roll with it and not get too worried about things, and just seeing that. And so I guess when I a little bit too, just I think I went through that phase where astrology kind of I would spiral out about certain things or get really worked up
Mhm.
about certain transits. And I think I've finally reached the point now where I find more ease with it. And it's just kind of like looking up, on your weather app,
Right.
oh, okay, what's the astrological weather like today? And so, yeah, I really love astrology. I just love astrology. So it's kind of fun to be able to talk about that with another person. And yeah, Whitney and I really hit it off when we met a few years ago, and just, yeah, I enjoyed that, that just other person who gets the Saturn archetype. And yeah, even kind of looking back retrospectively at, parts of my own life, and
Mhm.
seeing um ways in which, like, as you said, I was kind of restricting myself, but that's part of who I am, and what I desire, but that there are other parts of me that like to be out and in the spotlight, and gregarious, and things like that, but that I do need a healthy dose of solitude to be able to maintain that.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe let's talk about the Saturn archetype a little bit because we are in Capricorn season. We're talking about the Capricorn new moon. We are right in the heart of winter, or at least what I feel to be the heart of winter. I understand that, like, calendar wise, maybe not exactly. Um, and yeah, sorry, I just got so distracted because I was so excited about you talking about your child's astrology and how much I like, oh yeah, like, my child having Mars and Aries and just like realizing how much he needs to move around all the time. Um, gets me so excited. I love the potentials of astrology for helping us maintain our equilibrium as parents and not like project our stuff all over our kids and our partners. And so relationship astrology gets me very excited. But yeah, I think the piece about Saturn, to kind of rein myself back in, I think that, you know, as I meditate with the Saturnian archetype a lot, what I feel is so much gratitude and warmth for both Saturn as the container of everything, right? Before the outer planets were discovered and integrated into astrology, Saturn was really this like boundary that holds us together, right? We've got the sun at the center, and then we have this container of Saturn marking boundaries and endings, like death and limitations, but also, right, like Saturn ruling the skin, the like holding us all in and containing us. Um, and how, right, Saturn as the exalted ruler of Libra is really about like the harmony of things being in their correct proportions. And that means like not having unlimited everything. But then also from Saturn's perspective, I really feel that Saturn is so grateful for everything that is not Saturn,
Mhm.
right? Like Saturn as the container is filled by the myriad of other creative, juicier forces.
I love that. Yeah, the appreciation for things other than itself. Like, that's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And it is interesting that, Saturn's exalted in yeah, like you said, a Venus ruled sign. And so that Saturn holding the container for the beauty, like the truth, what's fair, what's balanced. Yeah. Um, and yeah, I think Saturn does appreciate all of the things that are not Saturn. For sure.
Yeah. And because, right, like, I mean, I feel like people relate to Saturn as this hardness and this coldness and this impersonalness. And I think it can really feel like that, especially when we feel weak or we feel insecure. And then, right, we kind of receive Saturn's teachings as this oppression
Mhm.
and feel really kind of victimized by it. Um, but I think, right, one of the things that we learn by Saturn's two signs that are rules traditionally being placed right next to each other is both that Saturn is the proper response to Saturn, and Saturn catalyzes itself, right? Like the external circumstances being rigid catalyze the development of discipline and sustainability, right? Yeah. Necessity is the mother of invention, but also this kind of, right, like Churchill, who was a natal Saturn in Aquarius, right, has that famous quote, when you're going through hell, keep going. And that kind of ability to keep going, we discover in ourselves through having difficult external circumstances.
Yeah, that back to back, that is interesting because that's that long grind through the double, like two signs in a row being Saturn. And like you said, that is the just keep going, and the kind of like, not that it's all suffering, but like long suffering sign. But it's interesting that it's flanked on either side by Jupiter ruled signs. So Sagittarius on the one side of Capricorn, and then Pisces on the other side of Aquarius. And so it's like, getting some juice before we head into, kind of the darkness a little bit, and having the fortitude to stick with it and stay that, and yeah, like the longest, like the thing, I don't know, what is it? If it's worth learning, it might take a while, that oftentimes the lessons or the things that we want, if it comes too easily, it might not feel as worthwhile as if it's something that we really have to work for, and that it takes a while to get to. So
yeah. And I think also, right, like those things, the things that we think that we want in life, as part of being in Saturn's realm, the possibilities are not infinite, and things have a cost. And so even the things that, the really beautiful things that we want, like, like for me, I always wanted to be a mom. And, that was my most cherished dream I remember being a toddler and wanting to be a mom.
wow.
And I mean, that's my South Node in Cancer, I think. But, this most cherished dream. And then I became a mother during my Saturn return, and you realize like how much it takes. And right, that like even the things that you want are these, have a really high price, just in terms of your body and your energy, and right, and how much of your own shadow you have to look at as a mother. And motherhood as really a Saturnian experience, because it is a lot of like, keep going no matter how you feel.
Yeah. I mean, just even growing the baby is a Saturnian lesson. You have this small vessel, in your belly, where you're providing this safe space for the child to grow, but at some point your body is limited, where you're like, I don't think I can accommodate any more growth here. Like there's no more, space for this. But yeah, and I mean, maybe like Saturnian as motherhood is established, and it's interesting too because they're opposites, like Cancer ruled by the moon, like they thought of, mother, and then Capricorn, the opposing sign ruled by Saturn, but motherhood is as holding that safe space for your child and holding that container of like limits and boundaries where, I mean, obviously you want to encourage the child to grow, and you will do that, but within like limits, like, no, you can't have candy for breakfast, or no, you need to go to bed before 11 o'clock. Like, so, creating boundaries so that the child can flourish and can grow.
Right. Yeah. I mean, part of that is, right, creating these routines and these structured environments so that, right, what we're doing so often as parents is mediating their ability to integrate new things in a safe way, and teaching them how to be frustrated without completely coming apart. And right, we do that through these kind of like creating these structured environments, hopefully that they can trust. And right, that's like that trust in the Saturnian structure to last. And if we don't have enough Saturn as mothers, then then I think it's chaotic. Or if we're only dealing with kind of the like darker, more sinister face of Saturn, right? The domination and the rigidity, right? Then we're not able to create a safe space for their kind of play and curiosity and discovery and sense of joy.
That's true. Yeah.
And so, right, that, I mean, that's the part of Saturn. I think coming to traditional astrology and really hearing the philosophy behind the aspects and having Saturn be the ruler of oppositions, because, or oppositions being in the nature of Saturn, trying to contain the opposites, and the way that Saturn is trying to stretch and hold together things that are going in opposite directions, was so powerful. And I feel like it's so powerful for this time of year, the first day of the new year, because we are in this liminal space of how do we both contain, like, understand everything that just happened, find ourselves at a beginning, kind of straddle the hopes of the new year and the griefs or the successes or whatever. How do we understand endings and new beginnings, and kind of being when we're in between them?
Yeah, the liminal space. I think that's a great word for where we are right now. And just thinking about, and I mean, I guess I don't know if I'm jumping into this too early, but thinking about the chart of new moon, we do have, some new beginnings. We've got Mercury is in a new sign. Well, not while we're talking, but for the new moon, Mercury will be in a new sign. Jupiter just moved into a new sign. The nodes have just switched, if you're using the mean calculation. Yes. And so there is this newness, and Mars and Jupiter in Jupiter ruled signs. So there is, I feel like, this, like, where we have this spark, we have this new vision, we have this thing that we want to do, but all the other planets are in Saturn ruled signs. And so it's like we're having this balance of, like, I want to do this thing, I have this new vision, but Saturn is saying, but you need to stop and think about it. Like, what's the best way to go about implementing this? How are we going to actually make this work? Like, you have all this drive and this energy to start something new, but what's the long game? Like, how are you going to make this structure last, instead of just building something up that's on like one Jenga tile that, where the whole thing falls down? And so Saturn, it feels like right now, is asking us to, I guess I said that, but think about the long game, think about the foundation, like where you don't want to build up a skyscraper on a foundation that's flimsy. And so,
but I feel like part of the tension, I mean, we're just separating from that third Saturn Uranus square. And I feel like as we got deeper and deeper into 2021, how that kind of grew in my understanding was things are so unpredictable. I feel like 2020's word was unprecedented, and then like 2021's word was unpredictable, in terms of like the entire lay of the land could shift so quickly. I mean, just as an example, I've been kind of trying to figure out how to get back to work or be able to dedicate more of my time and energy to my different career paths. And every time I'm about ready to send my son to daycare, we get a new variant and cases explode. And so, and then I kind of back off of it. And then, then it takes another 6 months or 5 months before it feels like, oh, okay, now maybe we're ready. And so it's just, I think we're tired. And I think Saturn is tired too, right? Like the kind of crisis of Saturn is like, we need to make this thing happen. We need to build the structure right now. And with these squares with Uranus, it's like, like what happened in Colorado a couple of days ago, like hundreds of homes destroyed in like one night. Saturn wants the structure, but like, oh my gosh. And what's happening right here? I mean, I'm looking outside and we have 10 inches of snow outside in a place where it would snow once a year and melt off in an afternoon.
Wow.
And just like, it's really hard to trust that we're on stable ground.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, is I don't think we are right now. And I think it will be a while before we are. I mean, even though Saturn's engagement with Uranus, like, is to the exact degree, like arc minute degree and all of that is over, it's still going to be within like the 3-degree engagement range for most of 2022. And so, sometimes it feels like maybe a little bit more stable, but that it's still this like push and pull of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, where you think you're going to do something and then something throws like a wrench in your plans, and then you have to pivot and change. And so I mean, I guess it's maybe trying to find some, and I mean, maybe with Pisces we can find this, but some buoyancy, like maybe, okay, it's like, where's our life preserver? Like, can we find, even if we're in choppy waters or rough terrain, can we find can we find our lifeboat, and just stay afloat with with what we're working with right now? And that was kind of another image I had thought of with this time. And so, Capricorn, it's the beginning of winter, marks the beginning of winter. The darkest night, or not the darkest night, but the longest night, least amount of sunlight, the least amount of daytime.
Yeah.
And so, but we have that, like, that hope that because the sun is increasing, the amount of daylight is increasing. And so I've just been kind of thinking about that, just even as far as with the Venus retrograde as well, but like keeping that spark like that. And maybe it's just like super tiny and it's just only right here in your heart. And maybe it is just a small spark, but keeping that like ember glowing throughout all this chaos, and knowing that like it's still there, and like the sun will start to rise again, the light will return, but that we are definitely in Saturn's I was gonna say Saturn's grip right now, but that's not like a great image. Like Saturn has his hands around our throat, and that's not always what Saturn is like or what Saturn feels like, but it can feel like that. It can feel that restriction, especially when we've got these other planets in Jupiter ruled signs that are just like, I want to bust out, and Saturn's like, but no, but stay here.
I just had that image from the Grinch movie when, right, like there's this kind of like, this Venus retrograde conjunct Pluto, we've got all the Saturn stuff, like the Grinch has stolen Christmas, and then all the Who's in Whoville like get in this, Jupiter and Pisces vibe, and they all come out and they sing together. And it's like, it's like, okay, well, what do we have when we don't have the predictability, or we don't have, and I think Pisces, right, is a Jupiter that's been through Saturn's signs, right? Like Pisces being, okay, we took the Sagittarian belief systems and we funneled them through Saturn. We lived through Saturn. And when we come out at the other end, like we have faith kind of stripped of rigid belief, because Saturn exfoliated all of it. Took our rigidity away from us.
Yeah, I love that. What's interesting to think about, because Jupiter's been through the ringer for the last couple years, and we had a little reprieve last summer, and it was kind of our little taste of hot girl summer. I mean, I think that's when they loosened the mask restrictions, and everyone was like, could this be the end? Are we done? And I remember my group of like non-astrologer girlfriends that were talking about this, and Saturnian me's over in the corner, and I'm like, just wait, coming back, and I'm trying not to be like the Grinch who's just like, can we just let everyone enjoy this for a little bit? But
no, that's the thing about like, hello, my role as your Saturnian person is, oh my God, it was so funny. My mom was here for a couple of weeks, and she was like, honey, you could be less melancholic. And I was like, my Saturn on the ascendant and 8th house luminaries are just giving you some side eye. But I mean, but I also take her point, and I think Saturn, right, can take itself too seriously, right, and forget that there are other things there. But I think, right, And really, like, when we fulfill that role of like, just wait, like doom is coming, often I think it's from this place of formerly in our lives having the adults around us, the Saturnian people, not really taking care of stuff. And so, right, that's when children step into the Saturnian role, just be like, we cannot trust you guys.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah, having to grow up and be kind of the adults that are responsible for things because the other people are not. You're like, aren't you supposed to be in charge of this?
Or like, you need to take this seriously. Why are you taking this seriously?
Yeah, no, that's true. It's funny. I remember as a child, and this, so I was born in 1980. And so, people still smoked around everyone, then. And I'm fairly certain my mom smoked when she was pregnant with me. But I was just remember this being at a restaurant and sitting, with my parents, and some of their friends came over and they were smoking, and we were sitting there, and I had pulled my shirt up because I didn't like the smell of smoke. And I remember my mom being like, that is so rude. Why are you doing that? And I'm like, I can't breathe. I don't like this. And like thinking about that now, you're like, yeah, your kid doesn't need to be inhaling secondhand smoke from people that are sitting 2 feet away from you, and just even as a child knowing like, I don't think this is right. Like, how come you don't know this isn't right? So,
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's this one time when I was in the car with my dad and he got pulled over by a cop. And it was speeding kind of in a minor way, but we had just moved to Colorado and he hadn't changed his license plate yet. So that's what he was getting in trouble for. And he was trying to say, like, well, like we just moved, but I've been going back and forth to California where we lived previously. And of course, like Saturnian me in the front seat, I was like, no, you haven't. Just like, oh, right.
like,
And like, what could the cop do really? I mean, it was just like, it was just I was like 8 at the time, like just me being oblivious, being like, why are you lying about this? Like not understanding anything of what was happening, but that like adherence to like, no, these are the rules.
yeah.
The rules. Like,
Oh my gosh. That is funny. Yeah.
oh,
Like someone's got to keep this in check, like that's
what are
supposed
you
to do
doing?
that.
These are authority figures. And then I think, right, yeah, I think, right, part of the Saturnian piece is having these really high expectations too for ourselves, but also for authority figures. And so I think, right, it kind of the Capricornian Saturn becomes the more rebellious Aquarian Saturn when it's like, no, you guys like do not have your shit together.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And I think we're seeing that collectively right now of this disillusionment with authority. And even if, and I don't want to get super political, but like, even if people previously maybe were like, I don't know, I still think that these structures or these systems or whatever are probably fine and working and probably out for the best interest of everyone. It's kind of like now everyone's like, I'm not really sure about that. Like, I don't really know if that's exactly true, where and it becomes really hard, I think, when you aren't able to trust, especially for a Saturnian person, but to not be able to trust the authority figures or like the people that are in charge. And it becomes this like, well, who is the boss now, or who is the authority, or what is true or what is right, like what's actually in charge or real. I don't know. Yeah, I think, and maybe that's part of this too, is kind of taking it back. I actually had written some notes about this, and I think I wrote this new moon, big ashram vibes. And so because of like the Saturn, or I'm sorry, we've got like Mars in Sag and then Jupiter in Pisces, so Jupiter world signs, and then everything in Saturn is like that kind of like freedom through restriction, I guess, a little bit, but also just like that kind of sitting down and like just sitting down and thinking about that, like that who is in charge, or what's the authority, or what's true, that kind of thing, and just sitting down to thinking about it, or just kind of letting things come in. And it also made me think about just like yoga asana in the like movement, but in this tiny little rectangle. So you're finding freedom in your body and freedom in your mind, and you're moving and you're like moving your body and all of this stuff, but you're in this confined little rectangle. And so like that made me think a lot about like Jupiter, Saturn as well. Like, oh, I'm freeing my mind, I'm expanding, but I'm doing it in this kind of restricted way. So yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I'm doing it from quarantine. And I think, right, the ways that, right, obviously quarantine was a lot of different things for a lot of people, but I know some of us found some freedom inside of it. And right, these like ways of, yeah, finding expansion within the limitations.
Mhm.
Yeah, so let's talk about this new moon specifically. I'm going to pull up the chart so that people can see it and we can kind of talk about the features. So this chart is set for kind of for my time zone. So your ascendant might not be the same, but the relationship between the planets is going to be the same. Just not necessarily, don't get too hung up on where things fall, because that's going to be different based on your location. Yeah, so we've got the new moon happening at 12 degrees and 20 arc minutes of Capricorn. So, right, how to relate to that in your chart. I mean, the Capricornian part of your chart has been blowing up because of the Venus retrograde there, because Mercury is just leaving. Capricorn is going to retrograde back in. It is, I mean, such a full kind of Capricorn thing. And this is going to be kind of the Capricorn season that doesn't die for a long time, because Venus is in Capricorn until March. Mars is going to move into Capricorn until March. Mercury is going to retrograde back into Capricorn. So we've got kind of an extended Capricorn season. So finding where that falls in your chart is kind of showing you the space that is receiving all of this attention.
Yeah, and just like a lot of revisions and revising. I mean, obviously with Mercury there, it just makes me think of, someone with like their legal pad, they've like written all this stuff and then going back with your red pen and like marking and revising. And with Venus, maybe it's a green pen or something, but just figuring out like, what's, what is beautiful, what do I know, but yeah, that part of the chart is receiving, as you said, so much attention. And yeah, it's just this long, I don't want to say long grinding, long suffering, that's just more like, but it's just a lot of Capricorn. And yeah, even further past traditional like Capricorn season, even when the sun moves out of Capricorn, we still have Capricorn, a lot of Capricorn vibes for sure.
Yeah. And I think, right, I mean, part of the spirit of Capricorn is it is the place of hard work. And so I think, right, even if we're having, a positive experience, like what is a positive experience of a Saturnian thing? I mean, usually it's type 2 fun, right? Like it's not fun while you're doing it, but after you've done it, it's like, oh, yes, that was amazing. And so, right, I think of Teddy Roosevelt, I think, was a Capricorn, and he has this quotation that always makes me just, I mean, my Capricorn North Node loves it. Far and away, the best prize life can offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing.
Oh, that's cool.
And right, the meaningfulness of your ability to work hard is a gift. And I think that this Capricorn season, this Capricorn new moon, this Venus retrograde in Capricorn is really asking us about the effectiveness of our work. And I think for some people that means like taking a good long look and walking away. And for some people it's cutting through, the Cancerian sensitivity that's like, I don't want to touch that relational dynamic because it's scary and it makes me afraid of abandonment and it makes me afraid of my own shadow. But really digging in and having those uncomfortable conversations and getting to the heart of things, right, is healing the structures that hold up everything else.
Yeah. and even, maybe revising or looking at, what are things that right now I'm working hard on, and is that actually the thing that I want to be grinding on and working really hard on? Is that thing worth my time?
Yeah.
Like, this job or this relationship or this whatever that I have been, spending so much time and work on, like maybe again, maybe you need to pivot and start putting that energy and time into something else, like, you know
Yeah. And I don't think you have to figure it out during this new moon, right?
right.
It's like we've got Venus possibly having a change of heart about those things. We have Mercury that's going to go retrograde um, in mid-January on January 14th and come back into Capricorn. Mercury is going to do the figuring out piece
Mhm.
of the stuff that Venus is having a change of heart about. So it's not all like, okay, January 2nd, the day of the new moon, like redraw all of your plans,
Yeah.
right? That's like not right. New moons are about listening,
Mhm.
I think, not about doing. And when we're listening in Saturn signs, we are being very patient and very quiet to hear kind of what emerges.
Yeah, having that moon, the soft moon in kind of that hard Capricornian place, it's like it might seem like contraindicated, but yeah, just trying to like soften in and receive, like, where it might feel like you're wanting to just like get out and do something, but like, can you stop and like, yeah, hold up your hands and just wait for something to come? And so that's another thing too. I mean, and I like doing this sometimes too, but like, where you're like, okay, after the new moon, maybe you write some intentions or this or that, but it's like, as I've gotten, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't say grown in my practice, but as I've gone further in my studies with astrology or just feeling into the archetypes and stuff, it's like this stuff is going to happen whether or not you've written in your bullet journal or whether or not you set out your intentions or put your crystals out to bathe in the moonlight, you know what I mean? And so it just feels like, can we be quiet enough to listen to these little messages or these little things that will come in? And I think that's the part about Capricorn too. I mean, I think about this time of year when in a lot of places it is snowing, it is more quiet and it is darker, and like, just it's very different than thinking about like the Cancer time of year when the sun is high and we're all out and we're doing things and we're making plans, and not that we aren't now, but like just taking advantage, using that quiet time and using that like just darker, more quiet inward time to just breathe in and try to receive whatever message is coming through, or maybe not even try, just, I don't know, surrender surrender to the flow a little bit, which can be hard for Capricorn stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because right, I mean, when we're trying to push all of this kind of like conscious energy into the new moon time, we're really trying to like use our sun during the new moon.
Mhm.
And I think we can hear, like, because things are quieter in the lunar front, sometimes we can hear the sun more clearly. um but we're also right, like this is especially the days before the new moon is just like the most receptive time, the most, and also right, like the time for letting go and the time for receiving and just not pushing our drive and our desires and what we think we should want onto everything. And with Venus moving retrograde, she's letting go too, and Mercury in the shadow of its coming retrograde. um right, as you say, there is this tension between Jupiter and Pisces and Mars and Sag being like, I found it, like here we go, and yet like the structures are releasing.
Yeah.
um
It's like that giving birth, a little bit with, your body is tightening up, it's contracting to release. And I mean, we've got time with this too. Like we have time. Like we've got all the time in the world. But I find it interesting too that Venus will pivot and turn direct pretty much at this lunation degree. It's 11 degrees, so it's 1 degree off. But so there's more to the story. Like, it's whatever we think we know right now. It's not the end. It's not the final story. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there's so many connections to all of these degrees, right? Venus will station direct right at this degree of this new moon. Mercury is going to station retrograde basically within a degree of that third Saturn Uranus square, and then go back to the degree that Venus stationed retrograde at and stationed direct at that degree. And then, right, as you pointed out in our pre-show chat, and maybe additionally too, right, Mercury is at 0 degrees of Aquarius, which is such a profound degree because it's the degree that we had that's Saturn Jupiter conjunction at and on the solstice of 2020, the great conjunction that brought us into this kind of different era. Now, it's also one of the degrees of the 2 exact Venus-Mars conjunctions that we'll have as part of Mars's journey into Capricorn and through Capricorn with Venus. Their second exact conjunction happens at 0 degrees. And I think it's so this 0 degrees of Aquarius, right? Again and again and again, what's happening? We had the great conjunction, and I think, right, the Saturn and Jupiter forces of the more social structure, right, had that great conjunction. But now we're getting the more earthly, the more personal, the Venus and Mars conjunction at that same degree, showing it in a more like physically manifested way, what that has meant.
Yeah, a more personal way. Like, what does this mean collectively versus like how is this showing up in my life, which will be different. I mean, obviously there's external forces and things that are happening in the greater collective that will influence you, but there's also just smaller things that happen in your day-to-day life, like like just thinking about, well, Venus retrograde as a collective transit, and it's coming into contact with Pluto, and thinking about, stuff that's come up with like women's rights and like body rights and stuff like that. Or if you take it personally, like, this is happening in my first house and I'm thinking about going, and so it's a Saturn ruled sign. I'm thinking about going back because I think I need braces again and going to get braces to fix, my smile or whatever. And so, like the more kind of mundane or personal things, but just how they work together.
Yeah. And 0 degrees of Aquarius is where my natal Saturn is. And so it's like, oh, okay, the third pass of my exact Saturn return was the great conjunction. And now it's kind of, more than a year out from that. And now Saturn, my ascendant, is at 11 degrees of Aquarius. So Saturn just formed its final conjunction until the next time Saturn is in Aquarius with my ascendant. And kind of seeing like, okay, how have I kind of brought that stuff from the 12th house into the first house? How has all of this kind of invisible work of my 12th house, how am I really going to make it manifest in terms of how I think about myself and my work and my role in the world?
Yeah, that's, I think, where it's so interesting to talk about, like mundane, which, I mean, it sounds like we're like, oh, just la-di-da day to day, but mundane just means transits that affect everyone, versus looking at your own natal chart in relation to the transits of the now. And sometimes, so it just becomes more specific when you're looking at your own natal chart and where these things occur. But I love, zooming out and looking at the collective as well, and seeing, sometimes it's easier to see, I think, in retrospect, like looking back a little bit and like picking out headlines of like, where if you're looking ahead and sign of like, well, these are, 5 to 10 things that could happen. Whereas if you look you kind of look back and you're like, oh, you can pick out those archetypes more easily. Like, I had looked at, we just recently had Mercury was right with Venus retrograde and Pluto. And in the headlines down in Denver, we had somebody, he was driving around to multiple locations, shooting and killing artists. So we had Mercury driving around, Pluto, which is death and killing, and then artist is Venus. So he was going around, he had like this big vendetta against some tattoo artist. And so he was, that's, so you can see like that in the rear view mirror or whatever, like, could you have prevented that or predicted that specifically? No, but when you can look at it and see like, oh, that's how that archetype played out for in this situation, this circumstance.
And so, I mean, in a small way, right, astrology, having these archetypal structures kind of helps us frame these super chaotic things, I think, in a way that can calm our nervous systems a little bit, right? Obviously, it can work the other direction if we are thinking ahead and, right, having that anxiety of looking at these things line up. But in the rear view, it's like, oh, okay, I can place that. Yeah, I saw a headline, right? So the Venus and Pluto conjoined exactly on Christmas. And I saw a headline that a bank in the UK mistakenly gave out $175 million on Christmas.
Oh my gosh.
Which is like, right? I mean, the enormity of that sum, right? Venus being value and money conjunct Pluto, which just blows things way out of proportion. Venus retrograde, these kind of mistakes, right? They're going to have to deal with getting all of that back for the rest of the Venus retrograde and probably beyond, right? It was just so on the nose of just like an absurd amount of something happening. But I mean, a pretty nice thing on Christmas for some of for some of the people.
You're like, you probably have to give it back, but enjoy it while you have it for a little bit. So yeah. And I think, I don't know, sometimes I feel like where they say like astrology good, like that's astrology good, where it can make people seem more callous. But I think there is that like distance vision, or that distance, like that Saturnian pulling away and looking at like the larger view. What's that? There's a couple songs that come to my mind with this lunation, is Standing on the Moon, that Grateful Dead song, where he's kind of like standing on the moon watching everything from the earth, and it's just kind of like the zoomed out view, but he's saying like, I'd rather be with you, like sitting on a porch, like kind of hanging out. And then I also makes me think of this song, I think it's Bette Midler, but like From a Distance, like, God's watching us from a distance. And so I guess that like 10,000 foot view. And so, I mean, I think astrology inherently is Saturnian, you know what I mean? Because you are kind of on the periphery a little bit, watching things,
observing, and it helps you kind of be impersonal. And I think, right, realizing that like that when, kind of like your fate comes around, like when your Saturnian experience comes around of loss or of limitation or of defeat, right, that it's not just you, right? Like nobody will escape a Saturnian experience, even if, it's death, and Saturn rules death, right? Framing our lives. And then you recognize that even if it feels like it's just you right now, in the long view, it's not. And I think that makes it easier to kind of accept our, the things that happen to us. Like I remember one of the Saturnian things, Plutonian things that happened to me was when Pluto crossed my Uranus in my 12th house, my boyfriend died, and he was 20, and it was very sudden and it was very sad. But I took a lot of solace, actually. I felt very connected to all of the women throughout history that had lost their 20-year-old partners in war, and realizing that like while this seemed absolutely tragic and devastating. And it was, right, at our time in history, that I was not alone in this being an experience that many, many people have had of losing their partners very young and facing, right, this Saturnian time without them. And even though it was unique to me in that moment, it's not unique in that kind of more Saturnian view.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, like how the difference or the other, like that extreme circumstance is still like uniting you in some ways, that lunar like opposition, the lunar opposition to the Saturnian thing, like bringing you together with other women who've had that experience of loss and death. Yeah.
Yeah. And so thank you all for joining us for this very cheery Capricorn new moon. If you've made it this far, you are probably a Saturnian type. Yeah. And I think, we can just say, like, this new moon is a new beginning from deep down in your hibernation. And you don't need to push yourself in a Mars way to figure out what it's about yet. And maybe that's kind of feels underwhelming for the new year, but it feels fitting for this new year.
Yeah, definitely. I know. Yeah, if you're the type to make New Year's resolutions, maybe wait like till next month.
Wait until March. Why don't you just wait until the spring equinox?
Yeah.
Yeah. Annie, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Whitney. It was nice talking with you today.
Yeah. And Happy New Year, everyone. We hope you spend some time vibing with Saturn and let us know how it goes for you.